Early morning over the shallow swamplands. It is hot and humid, and amongst the vegetation marches a flock of pterosaurs, scouring the low-lying water for food. These odd-looking reptiles are Dsungaripterus, and they are specialized hard shell crushers. Their narrow, upturned jaws might look obscure, but they are well suited for snatching prey from narrow spaces, or when needing to pry shellfish off of rocks. Using the front part of their jaws like a crowbar, and the blunt teeth of the back to crush shells open. One young male is having a tough morning. Like the rest of his kind, he has been wading through the shallow waters and walking over wet clumps of vegetation. But while many of them have been successful, he has found nothing. A female next to him plunges her head into the water, and 2 seconds later rises with a crab in her jaws. The successful pterosaur tosses her head back, securing the crustacean in the back of her beak, and then crushes her prey in her jaws, allowing her to swallow it in peace. From the rear of them, some Dsungaripterus begin to call out, and then rapidly ascend into the air. That is enough to send all the flock skyward, shaking off the excess water as they do. One of them must have seen a predator and sounded the alarm. There was no need for the others to confirm the sighting. When one of the flock flies in fear, everyone follows. Now airborne, the young male had to decide where to try next. There was plenty of swampland to explore, but he decided to take his chances further downriver, to the coast. After 20 minutes of flying, he came to a sheer drop, and below it sat a small stretch of beach. Though covered by water during the high tide, during the low tide it becomes a protected area of sand and rock pools. No large predators can access it because of the drop, and no sea predators can get to it during the low tide. And so, for the Dsungaripterus that know of it, this cove is a rare safe area. The male descends to the beach with a series of rapid flaps, before landing on the wet sand. There are others here already, keen to find any food that got stuck as the tide washed out, or remained in the rock pools. Our male walks to the rock pools, but notices one Dsungaripterus with his head between the rocks, most likely trying to pry a meal out of it. As he approaches, though, the stranger doesn't pull his head out. He is moving, but just not very much. He is, in fact, stuck. His head wedged between the rocks, and after going in too deep. And now he's pulling back in increasing frustration. The young male can hear him whine as he struggles. Getting closer, the whining continues, getting louder and more frustrated. Now, standing on the rocks looking directly down over the trapped Dsungaripterus, the young male has had enough of this one's annoying sounds, and pecks the top of his head to shut him up. Fortunately for the trapped individual, this is exactly what he needs. The extra bit of downward force is just enough to push him out of the rocks and free him. Shaking his head, the now freed pterosaur doesn't appreciate being pecked on the head, and returns the favor by pecking our male on the tip of the beak. How rude. The squabbling males hiss at each other briefly, and then part ways. Our male still has to feed. He climbs onto the rock pools, seeing some others standing perfectly still, waiting and watching the small pools below themselves for any movement, so that they can strike with lightning reflexes. The male wanders from pool to pool, and finally he gets lucky. One shallow pool holds a sizable fish with little room to move. With one quick strike, the hungry pterosaur snatches his prize from the water, and enjoys the day's first meal. With one successful hunt over, he rests for a while, the cliff providing ample shade and the sea breeze lightly falling over him. He sees an old Dsungaripterus walking by the rock pool's edges, the teeth on his beak worn down to almost nothing from a lifetime of use. This was the fate of many of his kind. When their teeth are worn down, they find it hard to tackle hard-shelled prey, and they have to target softer animals. The young male has no idea, but he is looking at a likely outcome for himself if he is not hunted by predators. Starvation from old age. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we will be covering the hook-beaked pterosaur, Dsungaripterus. Dsungaripterus was a medium-sized pterosaur from the early Cretaceous period, originally discovered in 1964 in the Junba Basin in China, Most of its remains are fragmentary, but some well-preserved specimens have been found, including almost complete skulls. On the ground, it stood 1 meter tall, while in flight, it had a wingspan of 3 meters and weighed around 10 kilograms. The most striking feature of this species is obviously its head, as both lower and upper jaws curve upwards. This leads scientists to believe that Dsungaripterus specialized in shellfish, using the toothless front of the beak like a crowbar to lift its prey from sand and mud, and then using its teeth at the back of its jaws to crush them open. It also had a small crest at the back of its head, which was most likely used for display purposes. Its body is more robust than most pterosaurs, so it most likely had a more terrestrial lifestyle, and as a consequence was probably not as graceful a flyer as other species. Dsungaripterus is a perfect example of a specialist hunter, evolving to be able to hunt a resource that most other predators couldn't make use of. A modern-day example would be a lynx that hunts small prey in thick snow. Millions of years of evolution have turned this creature's beak into a specialized tool for getting specific prey, and creating a unique-looking animal in the process. This has led some to call Dsungaripterus one of the ugliest pterosaurs to exist. Well, I say, how dare they? What has a Dsungaripterus ever done to you? Anyway, when we look at Dsungaripterus, we see how evolution can create such a weird and wonderful creature in order to fill an environmental niche. But for many that go down a specialized road, this can be a species undoing. It's all good while your dedicated resource is plentiful, but if anything happens to it, such as a plague or environmental change, you can find yourself unable to adapt and survive. While I don't believe shellfish were Dsungaripterus' only food, it is clear they relied on them, and that may have been their downfall. But what do you think of Dsungaripterus? Do you believe the only reason they were able to evolve such traits was because their favorite food was always available? Or do you believe that they became too reliant on a food source that was eventually going to run out? Let me know what lesser-known species you'd like me to cover in a future episode. And until then, remember not to judge a book by its oversized up-facing beak.